In the far reaches of explored space where the stars formed unfamiliar constellations and light traveled through strange colored gas clouds, the human starship Pathfinder drifted gently into orbit above a shimmering planet known to its inhabitants as Velis 9, its oceans glowing with hues of violet and silver from bioluminescent life below the surface, while vast crystalline cities sparkled like frost on glass continents, carved in elegant spirals with high towers that rose into thin blue skies. Among the visitors aboard the Pathfinder was a young explorer named Leo, chosen for his adaptability, calm nature, and natural curiosity. He was part of the diplomatic observer unit sent by Earth's Council to build peaceful relations with the Velari species, who had recently agreed to join the Interstellar Treaty Network and open their planet to contact with outsiders, a move seen as historic and slightly risky, since Velari culture had remained isolated for centuries. Preferring to evolve inward and avoid galactic politics, Leo's assignment was simple yet delicate. He was to shadow a young Velari scholar during the cultural exchange, observe her daily life, ask questions if permitted, and document his experience in a respectful manner. No cameras, no weapons, no data collection unless given permission. The Velari were sensitive about privacy and tradition. On Con, the second day after arrival, Leo stood in a wide marble hall glowing faintly from natural crystals embedded in the walls. A soft breeze flowed through the open arches, carrying the scent of ocean salt and living coral. His boots clicked quietly as he followed behind a tall, slender alien girl whose name was Nara. She moved with the grace of someone born underwater, each step almost too smooth for gravity, and her long limbs shimmered faintly with skin that shifted between soft blue and pale green, depending on how the light touched her. She turned to him and spoke in near-perfect English, her voice musical but layered with subtle tones that echoed faintly in the air. Today you will accompany me to the Health Observatory. For your scan, then we will begin atmospheric adjustment training to prepare for deeper levels of our city, she said with a small smile. Leo nodded, trying not to stare too much at her eyes, which had no whites, only deep pools of violet that seemed both alien and strangely calm inside. The observatory, a circular chamber filled with pulsing light and soft sounds. Leo stepped onto the Fondu scanning platform. The medical AI greeted him in a neutral tone and began a full-body scan, harmless beams of energy moving over his skin, recording vitals and reading biochemical data. Then it was Nara's turn. She stepped onto a second platform nearby, raising her arms slightly as the machine began its process. Leo watched out of curiosity, but what happened next was unexpected. Scanning interface, which had worked perfectly for him, suddenly began to blink. Warning colors pulsed softly across the screen. The AI stuttered in its voice, then froze altogether. Lines of unknown code flashing rapidly before vanishing. The image that appeared on the monitor behind Nara showed something strange. Leo squinted and leaned in just a little, and then before he could stop himself, he spoke without thinking, his voice louder than it should have been. Wait, she has 3 of those. The chamber fell silent. Even the low ambient hum of the machine seemed to pause for a moment. Nara turned her head slowly, eyes fixing on him, unreadable. He realized what he had just said and felt heat rise in his face. Immediately, sorry, that wasn't meant to come out loud. Nara stepped off the platform gracefully and stood before him, tilting her head ever so slightly. Her tone was calm and curious. What do you mean 3 of those? What did you see? Leo rubbed the back of his neck, trying to explain himself while avoiding eye contact. Well, it looked like you had 3 organ clusters near your chest, like heart nodes or something. That's all I mean. I'm not judging or anything. It just surprised me. I've never seen anything like that before. For a moment she said nothing. Then, to his surprise, she laughed gently. The sound light and clear her body shimmered softly as her skin changed shade to a lighter tone, the Velari equivalent of amusement or relaxation. You are not the first human to be confused by our biology, she said kindly, but it is rare for one to speak their thoughts so freely. You are honest. Leo sighed with relief, glad that she wasn't angry. He shrugged. Yeah, honesty sometimes Jumps out before my brain catches it. So you really do have 3, yes? She answered simply, we evolved in high-pressure underwater environments. Multiple circulatory cores were necessary for maintaining internal balance. The central core regulates temperature and nutrient flow. The 2 side cores manage muscle control and emergency blood dispersal. It is efficient for our world, though strange, perhaps. For years Leo nodded, trying to imagine what that would feel like, having 3 heart systems pumping in harmony, driving blood through a body evolved for oceans and gravity, unlike Earth's. He found it fascinating and a little intimidating at the same time. That's incredible, really. I mean, humans only have 1, and it barely keeps up when we climb stairs, he said. Half-jokingly, Nora smiled again and motioned for him to follow her. They walked through the corridor toward the next chamber, where pressure adjustments would begin. As they moved, Leo began to notice more subtle differences about her. How her skin adjusted temperature through color, how her feet flexed slightly wider with each step to maintain balance in lower gravity, how even the texture of her voice changed slightly depending on the shape of the room. He realized then that she was not just different. She was built for a world that had shaped her in every way, from blood to breath. And yet she stood beside him, spoke his language, listened to his awkward words, and showed no sign of superiority or fear. The air grew warmer as they reached the training dome. Sunlight from Velis 9's twin stars filtered through semi-transparent crystal domes, bathing everything in gold and silver light. Leo looked at Nara again, this time not with surprise or discomfort, but with a kind of quiet awe. She was alien, yes, undeniably, but there was something deeply familiar in the way she had smiled, in the way she had laughed, in the way she had chosen not to be offended when she could have been, for the first time. He wondered not just what made them different, but what might make them compatible. The moment held a strange stillness, not romantic, not dramatic, but filled with the kind of curiosity that shapes future paths and first connections. Neither of them knew yet how much would change in the days ahead. How one careless sentence spoken in a glowing room would become the start of something much larger than either could understand. But in that moment, the journey had begun, and neither was turning back. Leo stood beside Nara as the dome's glass panels shifted their hue to balance the incoming solar light. The temperature around them adjusted automatically, matching the Valari comfort zone, while faint mist curled across the polished stone floors. Everything on this planet seemed alive and quiet. Motion, adapting, flowing, balancing. Leo tried to match that flow, but his very existence felt like friction against the perfect harmony of this place. His boots were heavier than necessary, his steps slightly too loud, his breathing a little rougher than the ambient rhythm of the dome. And yet, Nara moved beside him without judgment, only curious, watching him with those deep violet eyes that always seemed to read more than he said. "You are thinking too much," she said gently, not with accusation, but with quiet observation. Leo glanced at her and gave a small laugh. "Yeah, I guess I do that when I feel out of place. Like wearing a thick coat in the middle of a dance class." Nara blinked slowly, her species version of a smile. "You do not disrupt as much as you think. Your presence adds something different. Different does not mean unwanted." He appreciated her honesty even more now, because since their encounter in the medical observatory, he had started seeing things differently. It wasn't just her 3 hearts or the way her skin shifted shades. It was the calm way she had accepted his reaction, the ease with which she moved between silence and meaning without ever raising her voice or demanding control. As they continued their walk through the learning levels, Leo noticed more young Valari observing him from behind transparent walls. Some stared with open curiosity, some turned away as if unsure whether his presence was permitted. Others whispered to each other, their gestures subtle and fluid, like underwater signals. "Do they think I am dangerous?" he asked after a moment, his voice low. Nara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she led him to a circular room lined with glowing panels and sloping seats, the kind used for open discussions and memory sharing. She gestured for him to sit, then took a seat across from him. Some Fear what they do not know, she said finally. Some. Remember ancient stories told before we even spoke to the stars, stories of creatures who burned forests and shaped mountains, stories of humans. Leo frowned a little surprised. I didn't think your people had encountered us before. Not directly, she explained, but stories travel through time and across the dark even before proof arrives. We knew of your kind from fragments, from transmissions, from warnings left in old orbiting stations. Your bodies are built differently, more dense, more reactive. Your minds change fast, your emotions shift like storms, and you adapt to pain like nothing we have seen. He absorbed that in silence, not sure whether to feel proud or worried. Nara continued softly, we fear not because you are cruel, but because you survive in ways that frighten us. Where we yield, you resist. Where we fall, you climb. That's just how we are, he said. I mean, Earth made us tough. We had to be with everything thrown at us, the cold, the heat, the predators, each other. Exactly, she said, with that slow, intense gaze. And some among my people wonder what happens if your strength becomes our weakness. What if we become dependent? What if your presence changes us? Leo leaned forward, arms on his knees, and asked directly, do you think dangerous? Nara paused, then shook her head slowly. I think you are honest. I think you see before you judge, and I think you are learning. He let out a breath. He didn't realize he'd been holding good. I'd rather be a bridge than a threat, she nodded and stood, gesturing again for him to follow. This time they walked deeper into the archives, where stored knowledge waited in pulses of light and encoded. Mist patterns of memory formed in the air above them as they walked through each section, until they reached a chamber where no one else stood. I brought you here because I must show you something that others do not know, even among my kind. She said, her voice quieter. Now there's a truth I carry. Not all Valari have 3 cores as I do. Leo tilted his head. Then why do you? Because I carry a trait that was long removed from our bloodline, a mutation. A throwback to our early ancestors. It gives me capabilities others fear. I can interface with organic systems. I can sense patterns in biological change, and I can even adjust my chemistry in response to external contact, like healing or adapting. He asked, his interest spiking sharply. She nodded, but the Council forbade public research on this trait. Long ago they feared it would lead to instability, loss of balance. So why are you telling me? He asked. Because since your arrival, I have felt a shift, she said. When we met, my readings changed. Your presence affects my chemistry, not in danger, but in resonance, as if my body recognizes something in yours. Something compatible, something unknown. Leo stepped back slightly, not from fear, but from realization. Are you saying we're biologically reacting to each other? Yes. And that is not supposed to happen, she replied before Leo could ask more. A soft tone echoed through the chamber, followed by a change in the room's lighting. Nara's face changed, her voice sharper. We must return. The council has called for an emergency session. Something has happened on the upper levels. They walked quickly through the glowing halls, and now Valari moved with urgency. Whispers traveled faster than light beams, and Leo caught fragments of conversations about a broken seal, a failing quarantine, an arrival no one had expected. What's going on? He asked her as they moved toward the transport chamber. An alien ship has crashed, she answered, low tone. Off-world design, not ours. Something ancient, something unstable. And now a biological signal is spreading. One. We do not recognize a virus, Leo asked. Possibly, or worse, she said, and her gaze shifted back to him. I may be the only one on this planet with immunity. And me, he added. They stared at each other as the lift opened. For a moment they said nothing, but both knew that whatever line existed between curiosity and crisis had just been crossed. The quiet science of first contact had now turned into something else, something unknown, something urgent. They were at the center of it. The transport lift moved fast, but the tension between Leo and Nara moved faster. The silence inside was not the silence of peace, but the silence that fills the air when words are waiting to catch up with fear. Outside, the glowing tunnels of Velis 9 passed like veins of light, carrying the pulse of a planet under threat. The soft silver of their surroundings now felt cold and distant, as if the city itself had begun to hold its breath. Nara kept her eyes forward, her shoulders straight, her fingers slightly tense against her side, her voice calm but thinner than usual. "The council chamber is in emergency lockdown," she said. "Only senior members and selected scientists are being allowed inside. But I will take you to the observation floor. You must see this for yourself." Leo nodded without protest, the look on her face told him something deeper was unraveling. Something that stretched beyond biosignals or mutation, something political, something ancient, something personal. He stayed close to her as they moved through corridors where guards in shimmering robes stood silent, their faces unreadable, their weapons hidden but present. They entered the observation deck above the central chamber, a high transparent platform looking down upon a massive circular floor where Valari elders sat in formation, their robes marked by age, rank, and domain. Below them, a hologram hovered, pulsing slowly, with a red signal shaped like an expanding spiral. It wasn't just data, it was alive and shifting, its core rotating with erratic flickers of movement. "That is the signal from the crashed ship," Nara whispered. "It is not like anything stored in our planetary records. It is neither entirely biological nor entirely synthetic. It pulses in a rhythm too complex to be random, yet too unstable to be engineered by our standards." Leo stared at it, feeling a strange pull in the back of his mind. Something about the shape made his skin tingle. He looked at Nara. "You said you might be immune to this. Is it because of your third organ cluster?" She nodded slowly. "I believe the mutation allows my body to resist foreign biopatterns, to analyze and adjust before damage occurs, and now we believe it may not be just a mutation, but a dormant trait meant for situations like this." Leo leaned on the railing, eyes fixed on the strange spiral below, then looked at her. "Do they know about your mutation? Do the council members know what you really are?" Nara's answer came after a long pause. "Only a few, and most of them consider it a dangerous deviation. They feared I would become unstable, or worse, that I would awaken something forgotten. And now their fear is becoming real." Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber. A senior counselor was speaking to the assembly. The language was Valari, but the emotion behind it was clear: urgency, frustration, concern. Another voice rose in response, then another and another. The hologram began to flicker slightly, growing faster in its pulse. "What are they saying?" Leo asked. "They are divided," Nara answered. "Some believe the signal is a threat sent by a lost species that vanished long before ours emerged. Others believe it is a natural phenomenon that should be isolated and studied. But some believe it is a test, or worse, a beacon." "A beacon for what?" "For a second evolution," she said. "Not just of us, but of those who interact with us. A forced change through exposure, a trigger for biological rewriting. And if that is true, then your presence here, your interaction with me, may have accelerated it." Leo turned to her, the weight of her words sinking in. "So we're not just observers anymore, we're part of this change. And some will not forgive that easily." The observation room fell into sudden darkness, then emergency lights flickered on. A new signal had appeared beside the original one. This one was red and white, flashing with growing speed. A message translated through the planetary system began to play in a calm, synthetic voice: "EBO field integrity compromised. Containment failure expanding within outer district. Please evacuate all biological research centers. Immediately. Quarantine measures initiated. Planetary shield shift in progress." Nara's face tightened, her voice dropping. "We have less time than we thought. The signal is spreading, and I fear it's adapting faster than any system we built to contain it." She turned to Leo, her gaze steady. "I need to show you something, and I need you to trust me." He followed without hesitation. They moved fast through the corridors, turning past familiar halls into restricted zones, where guards no longer stood and doors no longer answered to authority. They reached a sealed chamber deep below the city, one Leo had never seen, its entrance marked with symbols that glowed in pulses matching Nara's body rhythm. She pressed her palm to the interface, and the doors opened with a low hum, revealing a dim chamber filled with organic machines and suspended living data cores. "This is the hidden lab," she said. "The place where records of ancient biology are kept." The place. They swore never to use again. The place where I was studied when they found out what I carried inside the room. The air felt heavier. Leo saw tubes filled with glowing liquid organic samples floating in stasis displays, showing genetic structures that spiraled like galaxies. "This mutation you carry," he asked. "It wasn't random, was it?" "No." She answered, "It was once common in our ancestors, until the councils of that time chose to purify the species, to remove what they believed to be unstable. They feared evolution. They feared what change might bring, so they silenced it and buried the knowledge. But it survived in you, yes, and now because of you, because of us, it is awake again." Leo stepped closer, the air around them vibrating with strange energy. His presence was causing something in the room to respond. Lights brightened, molecular structures shifted on the screen's, patterns aligned and reformed. "The system is syncing with you," she said, amazed. "This chamber recognizes your genetic pattern. It is reacting to your proximity." "What does that mean?" "It means the signal might not be alien to both of us. It might be something meant for interaction. Something waiting for a match, something that needs two keys, yours and mine. And what happens if we unlock it?" "We change," she said softly. "We both change, and maybe so does everything else in that chamber, where past and future collided, where old secrets stirred and new paths opened." Leo realized he was no longer just a guest on Velis 9. He was part of a story that had begun long before his birth, a story that now moved through his blood. And beside him, Nara stood, not just as a guide, but as the only one who could walk this path with him together. They were no longer defined by what made them different, but by what they might become. Chamber began to tremble as faint tremors moved through the deep foundation of the hidden lab. But Leo and Nara remained still, their eyes locked, their minds trying to grasp the full meaning of what had just unfolded above them. The city was entering panic state. Reports of the biosignal spreading from the crash site now flooded the network more. The Lari districts were sealing themselves inside dome shields. Public transportation had stopped, and emergency protocols were overriding all civilian communication. Yet, down in this long-forgotten vault of forbidden knowledge, two beings stood, calm, not because they felt safe, but because something within them had already accepted the shift. Screens around them continued to glow, showing genetic alignment simulations. The strange spiral symbol from the crash signal began appearing again across different sequences, and every time Leo's presence in the room caused those symbols to stabilize, to settle into readable rhythms. "Is responding to human biology," Nara whispered, her voice filled with wonder, as if she were speaking directly to the building itself. "Your cells are triggering dormant functions in our ancient code. The third organ cluster in me reacts to the signal, but you anchor it. You shape its response as if your presence keeps it from spiraling out of control." Leo walked slowly to one of the glowing consoles, its surface soft like living stone, and he placed his palm gently on the surface. It lit up immediately, waves of gentle heat rising from the interface. The screen displayed his vitals, alongside a slowly adapting strand of code. "What if this thing that crashed isn't just a threat?" he said slowly. "What if it's a test, or maybe even a message meant for both our species? A signal trying to bring us together, not tear us apart?" Nara looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment, but her voice came back steady. "It could be that, or it could be both. Gift and danger. Change always brings both." Suddenly, the console flared with red light, and an alert flashed across the upper walls. "Outer sector breached. Quarantine collapse. Confirmed bioform detected in multiple atmospheric layers. Local defense systems failing. Immune response insufficient." "We have to go now," she said sharply, her body already moving toward the door. "If we do nothing, more will fall, and the council will shut everything down, seal the city, even if it means leaving the outer districts to die." Leo followed without hesitation, and together they raced through the twisting corridors toward the surface. Once outside, they saw the sky no longer clear, but veined with shimmering threads of biolight, like veins growing across the atmosphere. The plague was not like any disease, Leo. had seen it wasn't visible rot or decay, but rather an invasion of resonance, a disruption in life. Rhythm plants curled toward the signal as if confused animals ran. In patterns that defied instinct, machines began to stutter and fail on the outer rim of the city. A hospital was in lockdown. Its emergency dome partially collapsed. Villari inside were growing weaker by the hour, their bodies unable to adjust fast enough to the spreading pulse. "This is where we begin," she said, taking Leo's hand and guiding him through a bypass access to the inner levels of the building. He looked around and saw confusion, desperation, but also recognition. They knew who Nara was, and though some feared her, others reached out. One of the doctors approached, eyes wide in disbelief. "You returned," he said. "I thought you would leave the city like the others." "I carry what might save us," she answered, and she turned to Leo, "And so does he." They entered the core chamber where patients lay in biosupport units, trembling with the resonance as their systems failed. "I need to interface with the living systems directly," she said, placing her hands against the organic shell of the chamber. Her third organ cluster began to pulse visibly through her skin, glowing with soft white light. Leo watched as strands of her energy spread into the wall like roots seeking water, but the system resisted, unbalanced by the plague's frequency. "Leo, I need you to anchor me," she said, her breath growing shallow. "The system reacts better when we are connected." He didn't hesitate, stepping forward, taking her hand again, and letting her energy pass into his skin. His nerves burned at first, but the pain dulled into pressure, then heat, then something else. Data began to flow across their linked bodies, Nara's mutated biology translating the incoming resonance, and Leo's human system absorbing, stabilizing, and grounding the reaction together. They became a biological circuit. The lights around them steadied, the air cleared slightly, the trembling of the walls lessened, and on the screens above patient vitals began to climb slowly but surely. The doctor stared in disbelief. "It is working." They did not stop for hours, moving from section to section, linking with systems, adjusting the biorhythm by merging Nara's unique interface ability with Leo's adaptive immunity. Their presence together formed a barrier, a bridge, and a balm. But the strain grew heavier. Nara began to slow, her color fading from vibrant green to pale blue, her voice barely a whisper. "My core systems are burning too fast. I cannot hold this form much longer." Leo turned to her, grabbing both her hands and steadying her focus. "Then let me take more of the load," he said. "Our human, your system might collapse, then we collapse together. But we do not stop." He closed his eyes and let his own biology answer the call. The human traits that once frightened the Villari now rose like fire within him. His body burned but held, his breath grew ragged, but stayed, his focus sharpened beyond thought. The systems responded even faster now. The core wave of the resonance began to shift from red to white, harmonizing across the chamber. The signal that once disrupted now joined in unity. One by one, the patients began to stir, their bodies stabilizing, slowly returning to consciousness. Nara fell against him, breathing hard but alive and still glowing faintly. Emergency response units arrived moments later, and what they found was not chaos, but a room no longer dying, a chamber pulsing with the rhythm of hope. Nara looked at Leo, her voice faint but proud. "Your species adapts in ways we never imagined, and perhaps that is what we needed all along, not protection from change, but the strength to survive it together." Leo smiled, tired but steady. "Maybe 3 of those things inside you weren't just a mutation. Maybe they were waiting for the right spark to wake up, and maybe that spark was always going to be human." The sky above Vilis 9 no longer pulsed with wild light. The spiral threads of the signal had dimmed to soft echoes like ancient breath fading into the atmosphere. The dangerous resonance that once crept across towers and rooftops was now still and calm, flowing gently through the systems, as if soothed by a hand that understood its pain. Below the surface of the city, the people who had once closed their windows and feared every unfamiliar sound were now stepping outside their domes. Their eyes lifted, their breath steady, their hearts steady. Leo stood near the edge of the Recovery platform, his body aching, his muscles worn thin, his mind slow with exhaustion, but his balance held strong. His eyes watched the people, the children, the old, the healers who moved through the medical corridors again, not in panic now, but in careful order. The systems had stabilized, not completely, but enough. The strange bioform had not been destroyed, it had been balanced, harmonized, reshaped by the joining of two lives who should never have crossed paths. Behind him, the large chamber still pulsed faintly with low white-blue light, the final signal of the stabilizer core, running on the merged calibration of Valari and human biology. The cure was no longer just a chemical mix, it was alive, held in the rhythms of both Nara's rare genetic pattern and Leo's strange cellular response. Together, their bodies had become a prototype for a new kind of survival. Nara stepped beside him, her steps slower than before, her glow no longer as strong, but her face was calm, peaceful. Even she looked at him, not with questions now, but with quiet understanding. Their bond had grown past surprise, past curiosity. It had become a kind of knowing, a shared breath across two very different hearts. The council called an emergency summit. Again, this time, not to close borders or isolate zones, but to understand what had happened, to make decisions not from fear but from possibility. Leo and Nara were summoned as living evidence of what change could bring, and though the old voices of caution still tried to speak, they were quieter this time, their words softer, their tones less sharp. For what they had seen was something not even their ancient records could predict. Inside the grand chamber where knowledge once silenced questions, the two stood together, not as subject and guest, not as mutant and observer, but as bridge and voice. Leo looked across the rows of Valari leaders, saw their silent expressions, their thoughtful eyes, and then he spoke. He did not use big words or long theories, he spoke simply of what had happened, of what he had felt, of what had burned in his body and mind as he held Nara's hands and pushed his human cells beyond pain to match hers. He told them that this story was not about disease or survival only, but about connection. He told them that fear was not weakness, but the refusal to understand could be. He told them that strength was not in isolation, but in reaching across impossible distances and finding resonance. And when he finished, there was silence, but not the silence of rejection. It was the silence of realization. Then Nara stepped forward and she told her people the truth. She spoke of her mutation, of her hidden years of research, of the lies she had kept because she feared rejection and shame. And then she told them what she had learned from Leo, from Earth, from humans who carry storms in their bones, but still build homes from fire. She told them that change did not begin in the mind, but in the heart, and she had 3 of those. Silence broke into steady pulses of agreement, not all, not loudly, but enough. Weeks passed slowly. Recovery moved through the outer districts. The bioform signal continued to fade, now integrated into the city's living system. Scientists worked day and night not to destroy it, but to understand it. Healers and engineers began to model new medical systems based on the symbiosis created between Leo and Nara, new tools that could read rhythms not just of Valari bodies, but of others across the galaxy. And for the first time, Velis 9 opened its gates, not just to visitors, but to learners and dreamers. A new center was built at the edge of the ancient crystalline valley, its walls curved like waves, its inner core filled with pulsing stones and holograms. It was named the Crosswave Academy, the first interspecies biological diplomacy school of its kind, and the first 2 names etched on the memory crystal were Leo and Nara. They did not leave the planet, they stayed by choice, not because they were forced or obligated, but because something here had changed them too. Leo walked the silver paths, each morning breathing the air that once nearly rejected him, now welcoming him like an old friend. And beside him, Nara moved slowly, sometimes with effort, but always with grace. Her 3rd organ cluster had changed since the crisis, grown more stable, more integrated with her full system. Her body now carried a slightly different rhythm, one that the machines often could not measure, but which the people around her began to feel. They called it the pulse of the bridge, the quiet beat that held fear and hope in balance. And Sometimes when the students of the academy asked questions about what really happened on the day the sky changed, they were told many things. They were told about mutation, about immune response, about adaptation, about the accident that became a cure. But those who looked deeper found a different answer. They found it in the way Leo looked at Nara when she spoke in, how she smiled when he explained Earth habits, and how their hands sometimes touched not for reason, but because they already knew. No one needed to translate it. And during the Academy's first ceremony, when a young Villari asked Nara what made her trust the human at her side when so many had feared him, she answered simply, "I trusted the way he listened," she said, "and the way he didn't look away when my body told him something unexpected. He did not run, he stayed, and in doing so he helped me stay too." And the young Villari who asked that question would remember that answer for the rest of his life, because that was the lesson of the spiral, the crash, the cure, and the bond. Not just that life adapts, but that it connects, and that sometimes the bridge between worlds begins with a moment of confusion, a question asked without thinking. Wait, she has 3 of those. Yes, she did, and now the galaxy would never be the same again. The end.